because we have Rich here tonight. We really love this product, and we've been using it since we have been in this location. So I'm excited to find out a little bit more about it, about the momentum behind it and the social impact of the cause and how that became a successful and innovative business idea. So before we get to the main talk, I want to invite Ross from RKS up here to give you a little bit more background on what we're doing and introduce our featured speaker tonight. So thanks for being here.
Just talk loud. All right, so yeah, I'm Ross. For those who don't know me, I'm from RKS. We have an office here. We're a design and innovation firm. We had the pleasure of working with Rich on designing that unit back there. You know, it was really our goal to help him bring his vision of getting rid of bottled water entirely into a reality. So we're really happy to have Rich here tonight, and he's going to share that vision with you. And you know, so thank you, Rich.
Great, thank you. All right, not too much excitement. That's cool. We'll have fun tonight. My name's Rich Razgaitis. I go by Raz. And do I need a mic or no? Good. Do I need a mic? All right, great. Yeah. You think it'd be better? Okay. And I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'll just follow your cue. Just a little bit of background. Thank you. How's that? Okay, great. Again, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be a part of Cross Campus's event this evening, and great to be down in Los Angeles. I live up in Northern California in San Mateo, right in the center of Silicon Valley. Just a little bit of background on me. I'll kind of skip going through kind of a play-by-play, other than to tell you I've spent most of my career at small and mid-sized companies. So I started out Fortune 500 companies, worked with J&J and Eli Lilly for a variety of sales and marketing roles. And then since then, I've done a variety of turnarounds, startups, mostly angel and venture-backed startups. So I'm going to be pulling from those experiences tonight. What's cool about talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs, or the majority of you, how many people are here are entrepreneurs, or are in a startup, or thinking about doing a startup? Okay, where's everyone else from? Corporation? This group over here is like not the startup crowd, right? You guys the startup crowd or not the startup crowd? All right, anyone else other than startups? All right, I'm gonna get a little participation tonight, guys. I'm sorry, I'm gonna force you to interact. But one of the cool things about talking to startup companies and startup entrepreneurs is that any one of you guys could be speaking up here, and I'd be learning a lot in terms of notes and capturing learnings along the way. So my hope tonight is that I simply get to share a few things from my FloWater experience and what we're doing with FloWater, as well as some other business experiences that I'll pull from, and then at the end we'll go through a variety of Q&A. So on the FloWater side, I'm going to tell you a little bit about FloWater, what we're doing, our mission, how we got to where we are, and I'm going to focus on 4 principal areas. One is in design, and we've worked with RKS Design, in fact, so I got the pleasure of getting to know that group of people pretty well over the last couple of years. And so I'll spend a bit of time on design, probably a fair amount of time on manufacturing, because that was a really key part of our progression over the last 18 months, because we did some distinctively different things with manufacturing, and then selling and scaling. And then finally, on the personal side, just pulling from personal experiences, talk a little bit about team, market, money, and leadership. All right, so let's see. Okay, so on the FloWater side, let me give you a quick overview of our company via this 75-second video.
We all know water is good for us, but today we have a massive problem. Every year in the U.S., over 24 billion plastic water bottles end up in our landfills, rivers, lakes, and oceans, destroying marine life and the planet. Bottled water isn't just bad for the environment, it's also known to leach harmful cancer-causing chemicals into the water. Finally, all this doesn't come cheap. Bottled water costs 4 times more than gasoline, while half of all bottled water is nothing more than purified tap water. FloWater is a new way to drink the most premium water that's not only more refreshing and healthier than bottled water, but also eliminates the plastic waste and chemical leaching. FloWater Refill Stations feature an advanced 7-stage purification system that removes all impurities, including heavy metals, pharmaceuticals, and pesticides. It is then enhanced with minerals and activating oxygen, increasing alkalinity and making it healthier and more revitalizing than bottled water. FloWater is the highest quality water money can buy, yet it costs less than 1/3 the price of bottled water. So bring your reusable bottle, refill, and enjoy. When you drink FloWater, you're not only hydrating your body with the best water, you're saving money and the planet, one bottle at a time. It's time to start the revolution and put an end to bottled water.
So how many people have used the FloWater Refill Station in the back here? Okay, about 2/3 of the group. All right, great, thank you. In fact, sorry, I'm just gonna force a little bit of participation. You just gotta hang with me, all right? Because I'm like a New Yorker by DNA, and it probably drives Californians nuts, but just hang with me. What are the reasons that you like the FloWater Refill Station? For those that use it, of which, let me remind you, 2/3 of you raised your hands. All right, what was it? It's free?
Cold.
All right, free, cold, what else?
Doesn't waste.
Doesn't waste, great. No bottle disposal. What else?
Tastes good.
Tastes great. Oh, you say good. All right, sorry. See, I'm already marketing. Tastes good, turns it. Tastes amazing. All right, so tastes good. Healthy, what else?
Seems cold.
What was that?
Seems cold.
Seems cold?
Seems cold.
Oh, seems cool. Oh, that's awesome. All right, cool. All right, you guys hit it. You guys hit all the benefits and attributes of a FloWater Refill Station. And so one of the things, and this ties so closely into design, and the first thing I'd like to talk about, but what we're working on doing is taking a totally new type of water to the market and revolutionizing the delivery system, and then to do something that eliminates plastic pollution and waste. So when you saw that video, what was the first kind of marketing message that you remember from that video?
24 billion bottles.
24 billion bottles. Okay, great. And anyone else capture that? Bottle waste. So this is kind of an interesting evolution of our company. So one of the things that we started out with that video about 18 months ago, maybe it was 15 months ago, 14 months ago, it's a little in startup, it's like dog years, as you guys know. So yeah, it's definitely 12, 15 months ago. When we did that video originally, it was a bit more oriented around environmental consciousness. And one of the things that we've evolved to over the last 12, 15 months is to really focus on bringing a premium performance water to the market. So when you look at consumers and consumer behavior, what changes consumer behavior, a lot of people in the market say they'd like to do something good for the environment. But when you ask them, when you actually track behavior and see what they actually do day to day, whether they're willing to spend out of the pocketbook or modify behavior or bring a bottle. Okay. Bring a bottle. They typically, the rubber doesn't meet the road. You end up finding less than kind of a 10% successful conversion factor. So one of the things that we've kind of modified, and again, this goes back to design, which I'll cover in a second here, is focusing on bringing a superior product to the market that tastes great, that's chilled to 42 degrees, that hydrates better than anything you can buy in a bottle, and then that changes consumer behavior. And that consumer behavior change, of course, has all these positive attributes for the environment. So one of our core values is to eliminate the world of plastic pollution and single-use water bottles, period. Like that is our mission. But when you go and look at some of our marketing and our value proposition and what we're talking to consumers about, there we go. Then you'll see us modify that message a bit so that we can accomplish our mission, but do it in the mind of how a consumer actually behaves. So a little bit of history on this. 30 years ago, bottled water, for the most part, didn't exist. I mean, we were all pretty much drinking tap water. And this is now a massive industry. It's an $18 billion a year industry. Domestic US, $60 billion worldwide, and that's just bottled water sales. And then there's this massive market shift that's going on right now. This is really fascinating. So before I give you some of the data points about this, let me just try to give you an industry comp. I think probably the best comp that I've pulled for what's happening with plastic pollution is what's happened in the tobacco industry. So you look at the tobacco industry over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been increasing regulation, There's a social vilification that's increased as well around smoking. And then there's been a new market entry, predominantly that which was initiated by Blue and Enjoy. And now there's dozens and dozens of different vaping companies that are out there. So a pretty significant market shift that's happened in e-cigarettes. And I'll give you an example. I mean, let me give you some numbers. Lorillard, which is the world's largest tobacco company, today the market cap was around $22.5 billion. Lorillard, Philip Morris, all these companies saw what was happening, increasing regulation, changing consumer preference, social vilification of smoking, bans, et cetera, et cetera. They all had a huge franchise to protect, right? But they also had a huge portfolio of cash that they could have applied towards research and development of these projects, and they didn't do it. Why didn't they do it? It was probably the classic innovator's dilemma in a large company, which paves the way for companies like us to be able to go and be disruptive. And the same thing is happening in bottled water. And in fact, let me finish the story on Lorillard. Lorillard, later, in the last year, year and a half, acquired Blue for $130 million in cash based on $35 million in revenues, which had just launched several years before. And what's interesting about that story is Blue not only got a really nice multiple after not being in the market for far too long, but Blue is now purported to be worth up to 20% of Lorillard's market cap in the last couple of years. So it's pretty dramatic in terms of what's happened with e-cigarettes and what's happened with Lorillard's franchise in a major shift that's happening in tobacco. And ironically, that's probably most like what we see is about to happen and is starting to happen with plastic and plastic water bottles. So if you look at what's happening with plastic water bottles right now, and just plastic in general, plastic bag bans, Governor Brown has enacted a plastic bag ban, a resolution that's passed cities. I don't know locally here, do you guys have plastic bag bans in Santa Monica?
Yes.
Okay, and then in fact, I know some parts of Southern California have bottle bans that are on the docket. City of San Francisco just banned bottled water in all city and municipal buildings. There's a few that have, some grandfathering period or some transition period, like major stadiums and sports centers. But this is a major movement that's happening right now. And there's 100+ universities across the United States that have actively banned bottled water on campus. And I can promise you, every campus across the United States today has a student or a student group that's working on enacting some type of ban or ordinance to reduce the consumption of single-use plastic water bottles. So there's a massive market shift that's happening, and it's probably, remember in 2007 when it was really cool to drive a Hummer? I never drove one, but do you remember? I know it's hard to remember that, but in 2008, in a short period of time, it became extremely uncool to be driving a Hummer. And that same thing is happening right now with plastic and the pollution and the effects of it. And it is kind of lunacy when you think about plastic bottles and what it does to the environment. And there's one other thing that I'll mention to you in terms of the environmental destruction of plastic bottles. So one of you brought forth your first recall from the video was the amount of plastic bottles, of billions and billions and billions of plastic bottles that are ending up in the ocean every year. Let me explain to you what happens in terms of our ecosystem. Those plastic bottles, plastic does not biodegrade, it photodegrades. Does anyone know the difference? So photodegradation means it goes from one piece into two pieces into 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And what you end up with are plastic particulate in some parts of the Pacific Ocean that actually outnumber plankton by a factor of 6 to 1. So there's some parts of the Pacific where plastic particulate outnumber plankton by a factor of 6 to 1. It's amazing. So then what happens there? What happens there is it gets into the food system. So not only is it wreaking havoc on our ecological system, but then it's also wreaking havoc within the food system as well. So which is why when they do dissections of fish and marine life that are in certain parts of the Pacific, they open it up, and there's plastic composition that's almost a part of that marine life because they've been ingesting and eating and drinking plastic particulate for so long. So there's both a market factor that's at play here in terms of bans and regulations. There's also a big one in terms of just consumer awareness and kind of social acceptance of what's okay and what's not okay. A lot of people are saying, hey, this isn't okay, this is wasteful. So That coupled with really lousy market alternatives are one of the reasons, or is one of the reasons why bottled water still exists. And it's still growing. And there's micro brands of bottled water, and you can get black water now. I don't know why you want black water, but you can buy black water. So I suppose you could sell brown water. I mean, I wouldn't think that's a very attractive marketing proposition, but if you can sell black water, you can probably sell brown water. And there's a problem with the best of the best in terms of hardware on the market that's an alternative to bottled water. And the problem is this. The first problem is it's pretty much been uninnovated over the last 30 years. So this is a Motorola StarTAC in 2015 in terms of water fountains. I mean, there's been very little innovation. This is a single filter at best, and this is called an LK hydration station. It's around $1,500 up front, and then you've got to pay about $500 to $1,500 to install it. $500 would really be on the low end. It's closer to $1,000, $1,200. They can get more expensive. You've got to deal with drywall and sometimes permits and patchwork and whatnot. And it really looks lousy. I mean, you don't know how bad this looks because, and some of you do, but I mean, some of you don't know how bad this looks just because we've been using it for so long and we've been tolerating, mediocrity or something that is subpar. It's marginally filtered. It has a one-stage filter, which probably does about as much as a Brita filter does in your home. And I get using the Brita filter and I get using a one-stage filter. I mean, it doesn't do much other than kind of help you psychologically pull a little sediment out, but I get it. I've used it as well before. This is a really slow-filling machine. Some of these come up later in the design part of this as well, because part of design, part of experience is comprised of getting a lot of the little things pieced together and getting it right. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that in terms of what we've done with the FloWater Refill Stations and how that manifests. So slow fill, to fill a 25-ounce bottle right there, it takes around 30 seconds. So you think, that's not a big deal, 30 seconds. Then all of a sudden think about, you're at an airport, you're between classes, you're running to a meeting, you've got 3 people in line, there's entry, exit for people that are like waiting for the water fountain or the water station. It's just faster and easier to grab a bottle of water. It's just faster and easier. And it tastes reliable, and it's purified, and it's cool. So someone said cool. You said cool, right? So there's something about drinking bottled water that has to be a driver because of the cool factor, the brand factor. And if that weren't the case, 60% of bottled water sales would not be comprised of branded products. It'd be products that are the Costco brand, or Crystal Geyser, or Geyser Spring, or other generic types of waters. So brand has a huge influence on consumer behavior in driving bottled water purchases. So rather than go to the consumer and go to the marketplace and say, hey, you shouldn't do this because it's bad for the environment, or try to drink tap water because it's safe. And I'm not here to suggest that tap water is not safe, but I will say this. There's pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides in our tap water. There's chlorine, which is damaging to intestinal flora, which is being seen more and more data continues to come out every year on the importance of intestinal health as a marker for the rest of your physical health and well-being. And so there's stuff that's been done to the tap water that intercepts that to some degree. So what we've done is we've gone out to the market with a story of a product that's better than bottled water. And the first attribute up there is there's an element to using a FloWater refill station where if I were to ask 100 people to go and use a FloWater refill station, what their experience is immediately after using that, probably 50% of them would say, man, that was just really, really cool. Like, that was just cool. I don't know how you really define cool. It's a little bit like Ravi says, great design is hard to define. You just know it when you see it. So there's some other things that we've done with FloWater that make it uniquely different. We use a 7-stage purification system. That includes a system called reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis, or RO, removes all the pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides, chlorine, fluoride out of the water. I won't go into a lot of minutia and detail about what that means, but I'll give you an example. In Los Angeles, in parts of LA, I don't know what Santa Monica is like, but Carson area, we did an event there and we did total dissolved solid testing. TDS, or the inorganic solids that are in water. TDS is also one of the things that causes water to taste less appealing. So LA water, TDS, might run around 500-600 parts per million. A FloWater refill station will drop that down to under 25 parts per million. There's a dramatic reduction of those total dissolved solids. The other thing that we'll do is really fast fills. So our FloWater refill stations fill in about 10 seconds, or under 10 seconds per 25-ounce bottle. Chilled to 42 degrees, we run it through a coconut carbon filter, and there's a lot that's been incorporated in the design of this unit that's just intended to be a great experience, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. Last thing I'll mention is we've introduced, and we're doing this on a pilot basis right now, we've put a credit card machine on credit card reader on these machines. So we have two business models. One business model is like that of which we have here, where we rent FloWater refill stations to a business, and they provide it free to their employees or their customers, their CrossFitters or their MMA athletes or whatever it is. And we rent it for $125 a month. That's it, $125 a month. The other model that is one that we are testing and we think has great downstream application beyond just the rental model is a credit card model or a subscription model. So that's where we put a credit card machine on the refill station, and you're at Cal State Northridge, where we've got 5 weeks. Are you Cal State?
I actually bought it yesterday, the 1.5 liter.
Are you serious?
For $1.
Is that it right there?
I finished it.
You finished. All right, that's great. Well, you should refill and save your $1 before you leave. Okay. All right, that's cool. So we've got 5 refill stations at Cal State Northridge. So it's 1/3 to 1/4 the price of what you buy in a bottle. You're getting a superior tasting, superior quality water. You're doing something good for the environment. So that's something that we've been working on testing as well. And we've been really focused on the rental market. It's a huge market. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar market, and it's been highly responsive for us. So where we are today, and just a little bit of history on this, by the way, for some context, because this will come into some of the design conversations that we have. I joined FloWater informally. I met with the founder, gosh, it's been 2 years ago. Wyatt Taubman is the founder of the company. He's the chief marketing officer now. And I met him 2 years ago this month, probably this week, now that I think about it. And he was just initiating his race. He'd been working on this project for years, got a bank loan, got this bank loan and used the bank loan to go and build some prototype refill stations. So he had this concept. He's a surfer in Hawaii, hated the environmental destruction that was being caused by these plastic bottles, and didn't want to drink tap water. He didn't like the taste of tap water, saw all these attributes that were missing from a water delivery system like FloWater that were drivers for the bottled water market, and effectively came up with this concept. And so went out and proved the concept, got some prototype refill stations, built using this bank loan, captured data. After capturing data over a period of 9 to 12 months, sold the refill stations, its prototypes back to the manufacturer, and then went out and started raising money. And during the process of raising money is when I met him. So there was a fair amount of work that was done on a preliminary basis, or even kind of a more extensive, of course, on a preliminary basis, that helped forge this idea of what a company could be and what a refill station could look like and how it would engage with the community. So when I met him about 2 years ago, he was initiating the raise, and the idea at that time was to work with a partner. So I'm probably going to choose my words really carefully because I don't want to inadvertently slip the name of this partner and make it happen. I can just feel it about to happen. This partner was going to effectively be the production provider of the FloWater refill stations. And the deal that had been negotiated, which is not a bad deal, but it wasn't as good as it could be. The deal that had been negotiated was that they were going to be the provider, they were going to go and manufacture it, they were going to go pay for all the tooling, the molding, the dyes, they were going to do industrial design, they were going to file design patents. They were also going to retain the rights of all the tooling and molding. They were also going to retain some of the international distribution rights. They were retaining rights to be a reseller of it. And they had a moderately high cost per unit that they had tagged onto the price for each FloWater refill station. So we started, I met with Wyatt and we started talking to some of the investors as money was coming in. And we basically decided to pull a major deviation in course and go away from working with this partner to going and sourcing on our own. So I've done manufacturing in my background. I mean, I've manufactured hundreds of millions of dollars of nutritional products and dietary supplements and functional beverages and functional foods. Never manufactured hardware. So I'm going to run through the story of what happens in going through this process of industrial design, manufacturing, selling, and then of course scaling the business. Today, by the way, we've got 110 refill stations out in the market. About 70% of them are in fitness centers. That's been our primary focus. That's the low-hanging fruit. We're doubling down there because it's such a responsive channel, and it's great for other reasons that I'll explain to you in a minute. We also have clients like Red Bull, Google. We've got installations at Specialized Bikes World Headquarters in San Jose area, Marriott, W Hotels forthcoming. There's about a half dozen other big companies that we've got FloWater Refill Stations placed at. David Barton Gym. Does anyone work out at David Barton Gym at LA? You do? All right. Have you used the FloWater Refill Station there?
That's why I'm here.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. So 110 units out in the market. They're generating 80% of our contracts are for 5 years, generating $125 a month in a really rapid payback. And then we've got kind of COGS nailed down. Some of these numbers I can't disclose publicly, or I won't disclose publicly, but we've got COGS nailed down, we've got unit economics nailed down, we've got the exact payback nailed down. We've been below budget, ahead of forecast, above revenue projections in every one of our metrics over the last 15 months. And part of that is a result of sourcing and manufacturing directly. And then metrics aside, metrics are great, and you have to run the business according to metrics, but at the same time, there's kind of a wow factor that you want to have with your customers. And so if you just read, I'm not going to read this, but if you just read this testimonial, this is an unsolicited email I was copied on from a guy named Josh Kurz, who's a gym owner in San Mateo. And this is what people don't say about their water fountain. I mean, no one's ever introduced someone and said, hey, I have the most amazing kick-ass water fountain, and I don't know how they make the water fountain taste so good, but it really does. I mean, I don't think that's ever happened, maybe, but it's unlikely. And part of that is design, and part of that is brand, but then part of it, of course, is delivering a superior product that actually tastes and performs better than what you can buy in a bottle. So on the design side, I'll kind of quickly weave my way through this. I met Ravi. How many people are familiar with RKS design? All right, maybe like a third of the room or so. Probably half of those were RKS employees. So I met Ravi Sani, who's the principal and the owner of RKS Design, through a mutual friend. And so we were in the process of sourcing industrial design partners. So when you're building hardware, this is what this third party was going to do for us. That was all lined up. It was a big part of, this third party was a really big part of this business when we were fundraising, and also I personally invested in the business. So I looked at the business plan, and I looked at this partnership, and that was a key anchor success factor in this business. So for us to pull an audible and go it alone on the industrial design side, on the manufacturing side, and to some degree on the distribution, installation, operations, logistics side, it's a pretty big decision. And I'll come back to that in a second. But I met Ravi. Was introduced to him by a friend. We sourced, half a dozen industrial design firms, and we wanted someone that had could bring a revolutionary look to design, but had a lot of solid kind of design expertise that was based in blocking and tackling. So we didn't want someone that was doing it kind of a first timer. We didn't necessarily want to work with a solo entrepreneur or a freelancer. We looked at some really large firms as well, and just didn't feel like they were going to provide the exceptional level of design, as well as sharing our passion for what we were doing. And this is going to come back to kind of a recurring theme as it relates to sourcing manufacturing partners, sourcing distribution partners, operational partners. So we engaged with RKS Design. We started out with kind of the typical psychosomatic mapping, looked at what was happening in the world of hardware providers and where those would peg out in terms of a distribution curve and where the opportunity zone was lied within that. And then we did the same thing with bottled water. And so you might say, hey, why would you do that with bottled water? We took this perspective of, if we were building a new product that was going to be bottled, how would we differentiate it? Because the bottled water market is, it's a growing market, but it's hotly congested. There's a ton of different bottled waters out there. This is, of course, just a small sampling. And so what RKS we learned through this experience, is that there's this really big opportunity in the upper right-hand section here under kind of enriched performance water. There's no one that was really owning delivering a performance water to the market. So you had lifestyle brands and source water, so Fiji, for example, that had a story totally tied to source. And then there's basic and generic water, which is kind of the Costco or the Crystal Geyser or Geyser Springs types of waters that compete more on a commodities price basis. So we saw this enriched, performance-oriented area, and we said, okay, we're going to go after that. We're going to take some of the learnings on the hardware side of things, we're going to take the learnings on the bottled water side of things, so that if we were bringing a bottle of water to the market, we would be able to do so and differentiate it, even though we're revolutionizing the delivery system. And all started sketches and drawings, which led to a variety of key attractors. A lot of this, as I mentioned before, Wyatt, when he had started this several years before this process, learned and brought a lot of these learnings to the table based on the 8 refill stations that he had out in the market that he tested with thousands and thousands of transactions. So there's some really good domain expertise that was brought to the table, but RKS took it to a level higher. And then we went to concepts. And one of the great things about RKS, and one of the great things about great partners, is that they should make you feel uncomfortable and push the envelope a little bit. And so we asked them to come back with 2 concepts as part of our proposal. There were really 2 phases of the proposal. One was ideation and exploration, which is some of the stuff I already covered. And then the second phase was progressing into concepts. So this is the first concept, and the idea was coming up with it's called concept pillar, as you can see. And that's effectively the basis for the design that you see in the back of the room today. The second one, I give them huge props on creativity for. We just could not quite get comfortable with it. But this was the more aggressive, push the envelope, do something distinctively different. So this is the alternative that we evaluated. And from there, and some of this is not going to be linear just because it doesn't work out in terms of storytelling and sharing some of the key success factors that we went through along the way. But I'm going to cover this in the manufacturing side. During this design process, which was a period of about 16 to 24 weeks, it was really about 24 weeks end-to-end, we got 80% of it done in about 16, 18 weeks. One of the key things that we did, and we did right, was we hand-built, not us, not like 2 guys in the co-working space hand-building refill stations, but we had hand-built units that were built in Korea, and we brought them to the United States, really expensive. I mean, I'm not going to share how much these were with you, but these were really, it's probably 5 to 10 times your production cost per unit is going to be the price of a prototype, and that's in Asia. It might be 20 to 30 times more, maybe 50 times more in the United States if you can build prototypes in the United States. RKS could have done that for us, but we decided to go with our manufacturer to do that, partly because of economics and partly because we found a manufacturer and we wanted them to have the learnings from the prototypes. So what we did with these prototypes, we brought them to the United States, fully functional machines. So, they look 90% like a production unit, but they don't have things like tooling and molding. So these bezels, that plastic bezel that you see in there, the sides are steel and the front is polycarbonate, it's actually PETG, another type of temporary molding that ends up becoming polycarbonate, those lit up panels. And that front bezel where that gentleman is filling up right there, it's what ends up being an injection plastic mold, but that one's all hand carved. It's all hand sanded and designed. A huge amount of time goes into the hand building each of these units. We did that so that we could test the design. So one of the things that happens when you're doing tooling and molding, you can drop, I'm not going to say what we dropped on this. I'm thrilled with the economic structure that we worked out with our partner, but I'm just not going to share some of these numbers. I'll give you a range though. You can spend anywhere from $150,000 on tooling and molding to $700,000 to $800,000. So if you're going to do it and you're a startup, you've got to get it right. You cannot botch the tooling and molding. You botch the tooling and molding, your company could be over. And I come from the tech side of things, and so I've run CPG companies before, but then the last 2 companies were tech startups. Releasing software that's buggy, that's expected. You fix that tomorrow. You just got to get the code out in the market, right? And then you make iteration after iteration after iteration. Not that you don't want to launch a great product, but you can fix buggy code on the fly. You cannot fix a $500,000 mold mistake, and it's extremely time intensive as well as expensive. So we wanted to get it right, and part of getting it right was making sure that it was a great consumer experience. So we brought these FloWater Refill Stations, 3 of them, over, had them airship from Korea. It was $4,000. I remember we had a stretch goal of getting these in by January 1st, 2014. So a year ago, a week ago. And we were on the loading dock, me and my head of operations were on the loading dock at the cargo area at SFO. We had these air flown in on New Year's Eve at like 4 o'clock. And we hit our stretch goal of getting these refill stations into the door, provisioned them that night, and then 2 days later on the 2nd of January, we shipped them out for our first big event where we started to get customer feedback. And that was down in Florida, and then we later took them to Nashville, and then they made their way back to San Francisco, where they're kind of retired now. But we got probably 4,000 to 5,000 consumers using these refill stations during that period of time. Really critical. And this is a usability testing that you have to do probably in spades when you're building hardware because of the high capital costs that's involved in creating hardware. So next stage, just more photos of our users testing. So there's 3 phases of manufacturing. There's not really 3 phases. This is not official. Okay, I'm just trying to put it in some type of structure for tonight. But there are there are 3 very distinctive phrases that I remember from spending a lot of time in Asia over the last couple of years. And I've done manufacturing before in Korea, China, Mexico, United States for nutritional products companies, functional beverages, functional foods, skincare products. Never hardware, as I said before, and I'll tell you a little bit about our process of going through and finding a hardware manufacturer. The first phase is really just trying to get someone on the phone that speaks English. And this is probably the most concerning part of our sourcing manufacturing. So we had decided in May of 2013, we decided to bypass our partnership, our strategic partnership opportunity to go and build these refill stations, and they were going to go, they had a manufacturer that was already lined up that they owned and operated, they had distribution partners, and they'd done this before, et cetera. So we said, we're going to go and we're going to go do this on our own. So I started officially in early May of 2013, flew out to Hawaii, met with Wyatt, which is where the business was located at that time, we're in SF now. And in 2 weeks, I took a flight and ended up in China, and I was simply sourcing manufacturers. And I spent almost all of June 2013 in Asia meeting with different manufacturers. One of the learnings in phase 1 was to go where supply aggregates. So if you're trying to do manufacturing internationally, going to Alibaba or doing a Google search is helpful, but you're probably not going to get what you want. And in fact, one of the things that was surprising to me was the disparity between what was on the website and what was actually at the manufacturer when I visited. And the reverse is true. Some of the lousiest looking, you know, it almost looked like someone coded websites in MS-DOS, if that were even possible, had some of the best manufacturing facilities and vice versa. So you've got to go on site and you've got to go to Asia if you're going to source manufacturing, unless you're making plastic toys that, you know, are trinkets or something like that. Alibaba is fine for that. There's also a distinction between markets. China, I think, is a great market for scale, not only because of the economies of scale, not only because of pricing there, but it's a great market, and it's a great culture, and it's a great manufacturing environment. If you've already built out R&D, you've already proven it out, and you've got large orders that you can bring to the table. It's a difficult, in my opinion, market for research and development. So I went to and some of this stuff, you just get lucky along the way. I happened to be going to China to do due diligence and just start sourcing manufacturers. When there was I stumbled upon like the world's largest water purification trade show. That happens once a year, and it was in Shanghai. And there were, gosh, I think 100,000 attendees that were there, 1,000 different companies. And all they did was water purification. Anything related to water purification was happening in Shanghai, and a lot of the exhibitors were there. And of course, 90% of manufacturing for this is done in Asia. There's very little done in North America, nothing in Europe, a little bit in Brazil and Southeast Asia, but most of it is in Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, and Korea. So learning number one is whenever possible, go where supply aggregates, especially if you want rapid knowledge and you need to move logarithmically and you are separated by time and space, particularly in different cultures. Second, in retrospect, I wish I had hired an interpreter. My Korean is terrible and my Chinese is non-existent. And so I wish, in retrospect, that we brought an interpreter with us, and I used one to help set up meetings as well as just provide advice along the way. And we did fine without one. That's one thing that I would change in retrospect. The second phase, so we met with when I was there in June of 2013, I met with about 40 different manufacturers. And I had a key set of criteria of what great looks like for a manufacturer going into this. So I wanted someone that was entrepreneurial yet could scale. I wanted to be able to produce 4,000 to 5,000 units for us per month, but have their own internal R&D capabilities and have 2 to 3 industrial designers and research and development experts. I didn't want them outsourcing R&D. I didn't really care if they did the tooling and molding in the house. Most manufacturers don't. They farm that out. Wanted them to export internationally to at least half a dozen different markets. And I wanted them to be experts in water purification. So you go to Asia and you start sourcing manufacturers, anyone can do anything. So if you ask someone, hey, could you build this for me? The answer is absolutely yes, no matter what. And maybe they can, maybe they can't. But what you need, which is why one of the baselines for me was, have they been doing this and have they been doing this for decades? So phase 2, after we met with 40, narrowed it down to about 12. Of the 12, started to get proposals, got proposals from 6. The next answer is no problem. Anything you need, no problem. Can you do this? No problem. Can you make it in this color? No problem. Can we do it in this timeline? No problem. Everything is no problem. What's no problem mean? You probably have a problem. There's probably a problem that's brewing. But everything was no problem during the proposal phase. I've got a couple of learnings on the proposal side of things. Because there were no problems, I have no images to represent this, and therefore I don't really have very many good stories to talk about in the no problem section. But there were a few things on the proposal process that we learned along the way. And most of this we did, and some of this stuff I would do a little bit differently, but most of this we were able to capture. One is create a detailed and confidential RFP. So when you're sourcing, I would not ask people to sign an NDA. You know, I've now kind of been full circle on this in my own career. You know, everyone loves their idea. We all think our ideas are great. We all want to protect our idea. I get that. But the friction and the lost opportunity between protecting that idea and trying to get someone to sign an NDA is so painful for both the recipient as well as the provider that I think it creates it marginalizes the business and you lose opportunity in going to the market. Now, that being said, when you start to go deep, you start to go and share proprietary knowledge with people, and there's some real trade secrets or there's some secret sauce to it, then fine, have them sign an NDA. But when I was in China and Korea, one of the things that I didn't do this going into it. I had it written out, but I didn't have it visually laid out. That first night I got back to my hotel in Shanghai, I basically recreated a spec sheet so I could walk and show somebody, visually this is exactly what we're trying to build, here are the specs of it, here are the 10 key specs. Anyone could see that. It wasn't a passing it out to anybody, but anyone that I was talking to that was genuinely interested in sourcing as a manufacturer, I was providing this as a tool for, you know, basically decision making, A, B, A, B, A, B. Were they qualified or not? Were they qualified or not? Second, don't call it an RFP. Do not call things an RFP. If you're a startup saying, hey, I'm creating an RFP for you, that basically says, I'm going to go and bid this out to 20 people, or 12 people, or 10 people. And what you want people that are hungry for your business, and that's at least been my experience. And so, create an RFP, didn't call it an RFP, basically called it a detailed specifications document. And when we had the finalists, I was really clear in telling them, A, you have competition, but B, you're really close. You know, there's only a few of you, so you want to have enough of the competitive juices flowing so that they go and negotiate pricing, and they're competitive, and they're aggressive with their timelines, and they've got detailed plans laid out. But you don't want it to appear so competitive that they're not interested in your business. Because if you're Coca-Cola, then fine. You can go and send out 12 RFPs, and you'll have 11 or 12 people, probably 13 will respond. You get an unwanted proposal that you haven't even sent out because it's Coca-Cola. When you're a startup company, you got to fight and scrap for some of this stuff and be aggressive, and you got to make sure you're attractive to the partners. Never tell people your budget. This goes without saying, but when I was in Asia and people were asking on the manufacturing side, this happened This is the question number one. You know, the answer always is, you know, my budget is whatever the best price is for the product on time. One thing that I think is a good idea, we did not do this because I didn't think we needed to, and we ultimately didn't. But you can create penalty payments for missed timelines, or you could reverse it up and just create incentives, kickers for people for making timelines. And I think this is probably a good idea unless you have a really high degree of confidence in your partner. But again, this could be a $200,000, $500,000, $800,000 project, could be a multi-million-dollar project, and missing a timeline, it could be extremely painful for a variety of reasons, which is why putting $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 as incentive bonuses can be a good idea. You know, some of these I'm not going to cover. Fees, how to amortize costs. I looked for a few hidden signals. I remember there was one manufacturer that was fantastic. They were so good. Not as good as the one that we have, but they were so good in terms of final product. I went and visited them twice. But it took me an eternity to get my NDA signed with them. This was the one, I only used NDAs with about half a dozen of them. They were the ones that we were going deep with. And to me, that was my first leading indicator that these guys might be a total pain in the ass to work with, that they would not hit their timelines. And so, you know, I would look for leading indicators as we're going and sourcing, saying, hey, is this an indicator of what's to come? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. In the case of this protracted NDA, everything that's part of that proposal became protracted. And it was, you know, because we weren't Nestle, Coke, and Pepsi, and we just weren't interesting enough for them. Ideally, we work with partners, particularly on the manufacturing side, that do cost plus. Cost plus is basically they cost out what the product is, and then they charge you what your profit margin is, 5, 10, 15, 20%. And then last thing is try to be really careful not to encumber your company with a massive commitment. Some of these guys that I was negotiating with, they wanted deal size, they wanted deal sizes of 50,000 units or 20,000 units. I mean, these would be multi-million-dollar contracts, and you got to be careful not to encumber your startup. Okay, this is the third phase. This is when you start producing. And so I remember sitting down, it's 1 in the morning. We were working really late at this manufacturing facility, and we're ready to produce the refill stations. We've gone through all the tooling, the molding, the prototypes, revision of the 3D CADs, revision of the structural engineering, went back and made tweaks, modified the tooling and molding once again, just made little tweaks to it, not massive adjustments, because you can't make massive adjustments. And so I'm sitting with our manufacturer, the president of the firm, at 1 a.m., and we're drinking soju, which is like the Korean sake, and eating Korean barbecue. And no, I mean, I'm a little nervous. We just spent the last 9 months working on this. And I said, so is everything going to be okay on our production batch? Because we were producing the next day. Is everything going to be okay on the production batch? And his answer was, only God knows. And I was like, wait, what happened to no problem? And he's like, only God knows. And he followed it up with, we must pray. I was like, oh, you're killing me. You're killing me. You know, what happened to no problem? So we went through the process of structural engineering, and I'm not going to walk you through all of this. This is our final production series of days in December of, excuse me, no, it wasn't December, that was for the prototypes later. So there's 2 months after we'd done the prototypes. This was our, February or so. This is our final walkthrough. And some of this stuff, like these photos here, that photo right there took place at 2 a.m. That's 2 a.m. There are manufacturers. That's tooling a die guy on the left-hand side. That's up there on the upper left. That's what costs anywhere from $250,000 to $750,000. It's really kind of amazing. That's when you're buying it in Korea or China. On the right there, we're going through and looking at paint specifications. In fact, that's the bottom left. That one we're looking at the output. That's a injection mold that's spitting out plastic bezels, and we're checking the specifications of that to make sure it follows the specifications. So these guys worked really, really hard. I mean, they absolutely killed themselves for us to stay on schedule, deliver ahead of a plan in terms of quality and some of the specifications that we had, as well as some tweaks and adjustments that we had along the way. Some of the key success factors, not going to go through all these. In fact, I probably will go through none of them. This will be posted later. I will tell you this last item, though, I think is really important, and it's invest in the relationship. As an entrepreneur, I've made a mistake. I mean, like a lot of the stuff I'm sharing with you might be key success factors or lessons learned or a few things that we did right. It culminates from a history of doing some things right, but also making some mistakes along the way, and sometimes some big ones. And I think investing in the relationship, I will tell you, our economic output to our manufacturer, they have made tens of thousands of dollars on us. That's it. Tens of thousands of dollars over a period of a year and a half now. So they're doing this, A, because they believe in the upside potential, and then B, they believe in us, and C, part of that is a relationship. And I cannot underscore enough. When you're Coke, Pepsi, Apple, you can go to these manufacturers and raise Cain and tell them what to do and be a dictator. I think that's the right way of doing things. But you can do that and you can get away with it, and they'll respond to it and also hate you for it. When you're working with partners, and this goes for a team as well, this goes for employees, because there's this fine balance between pushing somebody to achieve greatness, but also making enough deposits in the bank account that they want to work for you and they'll do the stuff that you need them to do, even when you don't deserve the stuff to be done. And so there's a lot of things that we didn't deserve to have done that they went overboard for. And this week is a great reminder for me of that, because there were a lot of 2 a.m. Sessions at these manufacturing facilities, and that happens regularly with them. I'll be on Skype with them at all hours of the night on our end as well as their end. Other thing that's kind of interesting, by the way, I'll just mention this real quick. I learned through networking, just talking, asking people, hey, I'm going to go manufacture in China or Korea or in Malaysia. What should I know? What are the 3 things you would tell me I should apply to this manufacturing? So I didn't ask any strangers that, but people that have expertise and knowledge. And one thing I learned was sometimes in manufacturing facilities, especially in Asia where you're 5,000, 4,000 miles away, they'll run 100, 500, 1,000 units off for you. Then they'll run another 100, 500, 1,000 off for someone else and they'll put it in the gray market, which is why you'd like to do final assembly in the United States. So we don't actually build all of our machine in Korea. Those front polycarbonate panels, we final assemble those in California. And one of the reasons that we do that is to prevent any temptation. I have the highest confidence in my partner that I've ever had in any partnership in the history of my career. That being said, to eliminate, and we didn't know this going into it, that we were going to have such a fantastic experience, but to eliminate any temptation or anything illicit, you try to do final assembly in the United States, so it makes it a little bit more difficult for someone to run off another 500 or 1,000 refill stations and put up the gray market. Selling, okay, I'm going to walk through this really quickly. In the seed stage, it's really difficult. I find it difficult whether it's a tech startup company, and I ran a Groupon competitors, a company called Dealon, and we built a destination website for e-commerce, but we also built the web's first e-commerce exchange. And the company was later acquired actually by a LA-based company. And then another one I ran was a failed deals business. I took it over from the 2 founders that were there previously, and was brought in by the investors, and we totally pivoted that business, and within 90 days we were a totally brand new company, and then we launched a loyalty rewards business for kind of mobile payments related. Both of those I found really difficult to find out where's the market. You have to get out in the market. It's been my experience to figure out where the market is. No sales rep's going to tell you. You're not going to be able to figure it out from conference calls. You're not going to be able to figure it out in like the 4 walls of the coffee shop or the co-working space or whatever it is. I've tried. I mean, I've hoped for it. I've wanted to outsource that part of it. It's just a part of the business that I think is mission critical to know where is the sales artery. Because you've got to tap that artery, and that's the difference maker in a lot of these startup companies, in my opinion. And so when we started, we said, okay, we've got all these different verticals. We've got schools and malls and convenience stores and car dealerships. We had no idea what was going to be the most responsive. In fact, our hypothesis at the time was that universities would be most responsive. Well, universities are a massive marketplace, but they have long lead cycles. And what we found were fitness centers under the rental model were really fast turns. Highly responsive, passionate about the product, high disposable income. What's also great about fitness, there's 2 things. One is it's a great cross-pollination. So whenever you're selling, you've got to sell into somewhere. You've got to, not everything is going to be a pull. Even Apple, probably Apple has to sell somewhere. I don't know where. It seems like Apple's got everything based on a pull. But we go and sell into fitness. But it's a great sales proposition, and I'll show you in a second how we do that. What happens in fitness is because it's cross-pollinated, meaning you've got people that work at UPS, United, co-working spaces, Red Bull corporate headquarters are all working out in this ecosystem. It creates a pull factor which introduces you into these other environments, K through 12 schools. How do we get into the San Mateo school system with 16 refill stations in a matter of just a few months? And those are getting deployed. One of the administrators at the school had an amazing experience with the FloWater Refill Station at the gym. How do we get into the Red Bull's corporate headquarters? You know, not by going through the office manager, because that would have been a point of friction. Then we would have been selling. We got pulled in there. Red Bull executive worked out a deal with Bar Gym, said it's fantastic. When people aren't drinking Red Bull, they should drink FloWater. We'll bring it into the Red Bull headquarters, and then it kind of expands from there. So we found the sales artery in fitness. We're doubling down on that. So the key in the seed, of course, is find the artery. Find the artery, and then once you find the artery, the key in the A is double down on the artery. Throw gas in the fire, and that's what we're doing right now. It's a pretty big market. It's a $21 billion addressable market. And, you know, if you're not focused, it can be a distraction, but we think we've got this kind of perfect pathway. And by the way, the second thing, I said there are two great things about fitness. The second great thing about fitness as an audience is you've got healthy, fit, attractive people that are willing to pay for something that gives them a little bit of an edge, and they're there having a good experience. I mean, for the most part, no one goes, at least no one comes out of the gym saying, I absolutely hated that. Usually when people come out of yoga or MMA or CrossFit or the gym, you're almost always glad you went. So you're going there, you're having a good time, you're getting into your vibe. And so that's another great thing, because contextually then we're putting a FloWater refill station where people are already having kind of a great environment and a great experience. And this is how we do it. So it's, you know, it's, I guess experience selling is fancy for free trials. But what we do is we offer 2-week free trials, FloWater refill stations for a gym, fitness center, cross campus, whatever it is. We drop it in, no charge, no obligation. And then if they love it, we charge them $200 for delivery and installation, and then it's $125 a month. I think one of the key things about getting into the sales artery, one of the learnings for me, is if you're proving out your concept as an entrepreneur, you want to go and raise subsequent capital, which most of you do. Two things. One is don't go in your backyard. Okay, I can't tell you how many Valley CEOs I know, you know, come up and they say, hey, I did it in Palo Alto, therefore Texans are going to love it. Well, it doesn't work that way. You know, there's not this kind of jumping ground from Palo Alto to Texas. And so, you know, go and find a market that is somewhat representative of a mass market, so you've got, you know where there's a there. So what we did is we went out and I didn't want to go in my backyard. In fact, we went everywhere but our backyard. We went to Southern California. We had a few in Northern California, but that was San Jose. You know, it's not kind of the Menlo Park, Palo Alto, City of San Francisco. You can go to any places that had a bottled water ban. We didn't want to be accused of cherry picking by any investors. We also wanted to know, is there a there? Because picking the right market is probably one of the most important things that you can do. And if we weren't picking the right market, we wanted to fail fast so we can make modifications and improvements along the way. So this is how it works. And what's cool about it is, you know, I've got my financials at 2% attrition rate. No one's sent a refill station back yet. So we'll take one back if someone doesn't have a great experience. But what they end up finding is for 17 cents an hour to run a FloWater refill station and provide something that's superior to bottled water and do something good for the environment. You know, once it's in there, it's kind of hard to pull it out, especially because like the athletes love it, or the gym members love it, or the, you know, constituents love it. So this is where we are. I'm not going to dig into details other than to say this is our strategy, and this is how it's proving out what fitness is leading to these other strategic placements and these seeds that we're planting in other verticals that we're remaining focused on fitness overall. Our sales strategy is predominantly comprised of three things. The first two are using W-2 sales reps to go into the market, you know, kind of carry the bag, so to speak, so the reps that are going, calling the local businesses, trying to sell them a FloWater refill station for $125 a month using the free trial as the hook. And we're having really good success with that. Right now, I expected our CPAs to be north of $600. Our CPAs are running below $500, and we've been running that way for over 6 months now. By the way, one other piece on this manufacturing side, probably one of the greatest kind of things that came out of manufacturing is we ended up manufacturing at a cost that was 43% less than our first estimate. Pretty dramatic when you're looking at unit economics of 43% reduction in COGS. We did it ahead of schedule, ahead of even the partner schedule and what they anticipated they could do it. And we owned all the tooling and molding. We owned all of the IP. We had full worldwide exclusivity because we did not license out, we did not amortize any of it out. So we have full ownership of the industrial design patents. So on the manufacturing side, the numbers worked out fantastic. On the CPA side and the sales side, worked out fantastic as well. Second thing that we're getting into are enterprise sales. So finding points of sales leverage. I'm going to kind of skip some of the talking points on this. And then the third are using events. So we're doing a lot of events where we come in, drop a refill station off for CrossFit Games or the regional events. We provide the water for athletes, volunteers, staff, etc. And they have a great experience, and people sign up for free trials. And ultimately, we don't want people that don't love FloWater having FloWater refill stations. And you know what happens with your mobile phone? You get who hates their mobile phone carrier? All right, 4 or 5 people. Do you tell anybody about that?
Yes.
Okay, you tell some people, like, that's just bad. So we want to avoid that. So we'd rather have people have a trial of the product. It's not only a good way of kind of entering the market for us, we only want people that are fanatics about FloWater using the product. And if they're not thrilled with it, we'd rather have it back. On the scaling side, this is where we are now. We're in the process of raising an A round. So far we've raised $3 million. We've raised $1 million that closed in May of 2013, and then May of 2014 raised around $550K. Then October we opened up a round, our A round. It's a small A round. Some people might call it a C prime or super C. We opened that up for $2.5 million. Within 8 weeks, we closed $1.5 million of it, and I'm in the process of closing out the next million. Pretty much December is kind of a slow month for fundraising, but we're kind of reinitiating that, and we'll close that out in the next probably 45 days. What we're going to do with the proceeds, which leads to the scaling, are A, purchase 300 additional refill stations. Now, I told you about putting these refill stations all across the United States, right? And we have them in Baltimore, Florida, Hawaii, Alaska, Las Vegas. It would be really hard for someone to come to me. No one can come to me and say there's not a market, there's not a massive market for this because of the placement locations. That being said, managing the deployment of these are not small machines. So you got to ship them, you got to install them, periodic filter changes. You know, a couple times a year you want to stop by and wipe them down. Pretty difficult to do when you're in San Francisco. You don't have your own team in Florida, right? So we took our first 50 units, put them across the United States. Took the next order of 50 units, we put them all in northern Southern California. So we said, okay, we know there's a there, now let's focus on digging deep and creating success and creating a network effect. And that's what we're going to do with these next 300 refill stations. And then that 300 will lead to 3,000, will lead to thousands beyond that. And we'll start to go city to city or horizontally using strategic partners like a Sodexo or an Aramark or a Delaware North or a Cisco or Canteen Vending or Bon Appetit, and about 4 or 5 of those types of partners. I'm not saying necessarily those partners, but 4 or 5 of those types of partners we've already initiated progress with, and we've already got some deployments through them, which is where we see sales leverage. And then finally, expand the team, events, and product and business development. So there's some modifications. Even in the last 6 months, we made some modifications to the refill station. So we turned it from a 1.0 model to a 1.2. I'm not going to go through the changes and improvements. There's some things that we'll do with 1.5. Ultimately, ultimately what can happen here, what we believe we can do, is effectively use water to create a new beverage category. And there are a number of different ways where FloWater, trying to just be, I tend to want to overshare. So I'm just trying to be cognizant of how much I should share about this. No one is differentiating water when you buy it in a retail store from the town. And when I say no one, there's very few. Your Starbucks coffee is not brewed with a certain type of water. It's just water. So there's downstream opportunity that's really compelling for us to be able to take a brand that we're building in a very focused way, developing a network effect, using strategic third-party partners to get into other channels and verticals, and then drive that into product line extensions where we bring FloWater into the home and FloWater into the commercial setting. So that's some of the foundation of, so are we going after a commercial application unit with research proceeds? No, absolutely not. We're doubling down and putting more money towards northern Southern California and getting this out in the market and throwing gas on the fire. But is our product development pipeline planned out for the next 5 years? It is. And of course it's going to change. But every move that we're making over the next few iterations, all based on kind of this evolution of where we think water can go and where FloWater can represent a new, distinctive, revolutionary way of consuming, drinking, and enjoying water. I'm going to close on this. I'm going to skip this. Okay. I'm going to close on this. I read about this years ago. It's simple. You might look at this and say, look, this is so simple, it's stupid. That's cool. But sometimes, simple things work. And I read about this maybe 5, 10 years ago, and I just have found it to be a really helpful framework, particularly in a startup company where you've got so many decisions that are kind of encumbering you, so many distractions, everything kind of feels like a fire. This framework has been really beneficial. And the framework is really simple. The framework is this. If you've got a small decision, you have enough information, make the decision now and just get it done with. Just get it out of your mind because it's clutter. There's a lot of data that's coming out right now where there's kind of a decision-making threshold that people have. I think there's a lot of data that actually suggests this even calorically is true with human physiology, that your body has kind of a maximum expendable number of calories that it can process, and then there's kind of a tipping point. So there's a lot of data on that, but there's data that's come out over the last couple of years around decision making, where there is absolutely decision fatigue. Small decisions, good enough, get it done with. And I think one of the things that I've seen in startups, I've experienced, but I've seen it in startups, boards that I sit on, is spending time pontificating, deciding about the things that are so immaterial to the business. You just have to throw them out. You have to throw them out, make your decision, move on. I'm a huge fan of 80% solutions, make your decision fast. And if it's immaterial to big outcomes. Okay? Now, here's the flip side. I use the opposite approach, though, on these big decisions, which is if there is a big decision, sometimes there's this, you just feel this push. I don't know if it's an investor push, or you just have an internal push, or the organizational push, to really make a large strategic decision when you don't need to make it. And on big decisions, if there's any uncertainty, there's no immediacy, there's more data that's coming, and we're in the process of speculating, but we also know more data is coming, I punt on all those decisions. I just try to punt as long as possible. I just keep kicking that ball down the field and let these big decisions rest. Because what happens with that is more data increases the confidence interval, lowers the risk, and these decisions are highly material outcomes. So 3, 4, 5 decisions, you can't do this with 50 decisions. 3, 4, 5 decisions though, I try to punt as long as possible and make the decision at the last possible minute because I want to have a 99% confidence interval on those. All the other ones, just get rid of them. Get rid of them, get rid of them, move them so you can think about the stuff that really matters. Closing slide, lessons learned along the way. I'm only going, this is based on kind of culmination of reading and doing a few things right, doing a few things wrong, and prior companies, startup turnarounds, and some mid-sized companies. There's only a few that I'm going to mention there. One is under the leadership. I'm mentioning this not because I think it's the most important of the 12 that I've put up there. Some of these you've seen 100 times before. But no one's going to tell you this. You need to maintain your level of physical and mental, emotional, soulful engagement with the business. You've got investors that are counting on you. I've got a team that's counting on me. You've got family that's counting on me. Your job is to operate at the highest possible capacity. That's my job. And no investor has ever asked me, Raz, how are you doing with your workouts? Are you eating well? How's your paleo going? No one's going to ask you that question. No one cares. No one cares if you get enough sleep. Your investors do not care. I've never had an investor ask me about that. That's not their job to care. But I will say this as a CEO and an operator and someone that's kind of gone through half a dozen different startups, growth companies, or restarts. I have had cycles where I've been in much better shape, and this is now an era where I'm in much better shape than I was a decade ago. It makes a material difference for your organization and my organization when I'm operating at high capacities. That doesn't mean you don't pull all-nighters. I don't know how to run a startup company and not do all-nighters. If someone knows how to do that, they're smarter than I am. Sometimes that's just required. It's not like farming, in some ways it is like farming, I suppose, but it's not like farming in the summertime. It's like farming when it's harvest time, and when it's time to harvest, you work your brains out, and sometimes you've just got to sprint. At the same time, you've got to chill it out and unwind a bit. The other thing that I'll add is some of this leadership one. All this other stuff, by the way, the 3 biggest reasons startup companies fail, there's no market for the product, they have some type of cataclysmic team failure, or they run out of money. So I think about that stuff all the time because those are variables that I can solve for. This fourth one, is intertwined with all of it, which is why I'm spending my time on leadership. I think another thing that I have learned both through a little bit of success and plenty of failure, is to be abundantly confident and yet have humility. This is really hard for entrepreneurs. Why is it really hard for entrepreneurs? Because you've had people telling you, no, you can't do that your whole life. And you've been saying, nope, screw you, I am going to do that. Or I'm going to make that happen. You don't say screw you, that's a little fast. But you say, no, I'm going to make that happen. Sometimes you do get that mindset, but you kind of do. Like, it's like, no, like, forget you, I'm going to make this happen. You can't tell me no. And you have to know, and I have to know, when to regulate that. Because there's times when to regulate that and to use that and leverage that. When you know you have a market and people are telling you, hey, that can't happen, or they're never going to be able to manufacture, you're never going to get it done in time, you've never done that before, whatever it is, you got to forge forward. There's other times though where you need to exercise, and I need to exercise a high degree of humility so that you can be receptive to what the market's telling you, what the team's telling you, and do what's right for the business and do what's right for the shareholders. It's hard to do, especially for a lot of entrepreneurs where you get kind of your ego tied up into the business. Everyone has one. It's really difficult for some people to be able to separate kind of your own identity or your own kind of involvement and engagement with the business with that which is really materially important to the business in driving success for the shareholders and for the team. And then if those two things happen, then it'll be fine. So kind of lastly, above all else, focus on the three things. It's so easy to get distracted. I have three things, and like the crowd can kind of hit the fan for the other things, and I just don't get too worked up about it. But if the crowd hits the fan on the three things, I get really, really, really worked up. I think you just got to have a laser focus on the three things that matter most. And know that going into fundraising plenty of time in advance so that you can build your business accordingly. And then the last thing really is, as entrepreneurs, we've all got to own our results. I mean, at the end of the day, it's you. You've got to make it happen. You've got to make it happen. I've got to make it happen. It's my job. It's my job for the shareholders. It's my job for the team. And I think it's also how we're wired. I mean, you wouldn't want to be in the hot seat if you weren't wired that way to some degree. But there's no excuses. There's no, well, hey, this happened and that happened. And if you allow for that, even if that did happen, if you allow for that, you're down a path of failure. I'm down a path of failure. So I can never let myself think like that. I've got to own the results. I've got to drive the results. I've got to bring the results to the business and the team. So with that, do we have time for Q&A, or did I eat into all of our time?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah? All right. Any questions?
How long do you think it will be before you have home models?
Okay, the question was how long before we'll have home units? Well, we're working on them. I mean, we're making some intentional progress on that. That's probably been the biggest hidden market opportunity. It's not totally hidden, of course, but about 20% of gym members where we have FloWater Refill Station have requested a home unit. So it's on the docket. You'd like to have one?
Yes.
No.
Because if anyone who knows anything about water, it's disgusting. And I have 3 different units that I use to clean the water and test it, because I know enough to know how bad the water is. And still, it would be so much better if it was 1 unit, and I would pay for that instead of having to give 3.
How much would you pay for it?
How much would I pay for
Yeah.
it?
How much would you pay a month for it?
How much am I paying right now? Well,
No, how much would you pay for a home unit? This is
I
how I get, by the way,
personally-
this is how I get my market feedback. I just have to, I'm going to take advantage of it.
$50 a
You
month.
pay $50 a month. Interesting. Okay, 80% of the people. 80% of the people come back and say $50 a month. Maybe 90%. You know what? And that's like one of these challenges. As an entrepreneur, as an investor in the company, you talk to the board, you look at the business. I go back to the 3 things. It's really challenging because we've got this great opportunity with home units, yet we've got a huge, a massive opportunity for these refill stations. Just the product that we have right here, we think it's going to be, it's going to be this e-cigarette kind of revolution that's happening in plastic and plastic water bottles. And so that's one of the things we're wrestling with. It's absolutely on the product roadmap. It's just a matter of where it falls in the timeline.
And do you have hot units, like hot water?
We don't. So that's another good question. That's under R&D project for version 1.5, is to have a hot water dispenser. And that I think will open up significantly a different channel for us that we've not really been focusing on. We're starting to get a lot of calls and requests for office buildings that have not been a primary focus, but they have simply said, hey, I'd love to replace both these units, kind of the water cooler and the hot water system. So that's in process right now, and that is like right down our alley, and that's part of what we're using the proceeds for. Yeah, good question. And other things, by the way, like we can create effectively at some point a new beverage category. So there's things, you know, carbonation, but then you go one step beyond carbonation, you can go to flavoring, and you can go to customization, and you can have your own mineral filter. And I'm not going to go too far down the road in terms of like the next 3 to 5 years of product development, what happens potentially at retail, but it really becomes an interesting business. Okay, right here.
Okay. I'm starting my third startup now, and I've noticed that the further you go, the more useful people you are able to hire. And
right.
The bigger team becomes, the more useful people you need. So how would you recommend to distribute equity within?
Okay, so the question was earlier, basically how do you distribute equity?
Right.
Okay.
With scaling, combine it with scaling.
Combined with scaling.
Right.
Well, so do you have an option pool carved out? What percent?
20.
20%. Okay, good. How many people have that are running startups have about 20% carved out option pool? Okay. How do you guys pay people well? How do you incentivize people? Are you guys all founders then? Mostly founders? Yeah, a lot of founders. All right. You know, so there's so much. That's such a tough question to answer succinctly because you got everything from like the seed scenario for a COO that's coming in at the seed stage, which is probably much more like a co-founder at that point, versus VP of sales and marketing at a Series A that might get more conventionally 1 to 1.5%. So more earlier on. I mean, my perspective on this is I reward the risk takers and the people that are laying the foundation, and so. I try to allocate more options historically in my companies to people that have been earlier in the business, particularly because I think hiring at the seed stage is the most difficult stage because you've got, I don't know, $200, $500, $1 million raised. $1 million might sound like a lot when you're building hardware and you've got really big capital expenses. It's not a lot. If you're building software and you got $500K, you can hire a bunch of developers and some biz dev people. I use equity pretty liberally early on. When I say liberally, not recklessly at all. I mean, use it very methodically, but try to be really fair and equitable on the options piece earlier on.
Okay, and does it mean that you are not going to hire risk takers at the growth stage, or?
Yeah. Then the question is, would I not hire risk takers at the growth stage? Well, by virtue of the fact that they're coming in later stage, probably self-selecting to some degree, but they're less of a risk taker. So someone coming at the A and B round, obviously has kind of a different risk profile, or they have kind of a different desire to have more of a market salary and a little bit of upside rather than a lot of upside and take a tremendous amount of risk early on. So what I look for when I'm hiring people, high degree of competence, best indicator of future performance, past behavior. I mean, over and over and over again. Best indicator of future performance, past behavior. 2, are they great with the team? And I would not underestimate chemistry with the team. I think chemistry, you don't have to have it to have a successful business, but when you have it, it's magic. It's just absolutely magic. And you can't describe it. It's kind of like, I feel about chemistry in a team like Robbie feels with design. Like you can't just describe brilliant design, you just see it and you feel it. The third thing is tenacity. I just look for people that are really tenacious, and then kind of fourth related to that, passionate. Good questions. Other questions? Yes? Go ahead, man in the back.
When you were
Thanks guys for those questions, by the way.
When you were talking with clients that didn't really realize they had a need, what would you do? Would you move house and go to the ones that already recognize it?
So the question was, when you're talking to clients, they don't recognize the need. What do you do? It's such a good question, because it's such an annoying situation when they don't recognize how great the product is and how horrible life is without it, and it happens. And I think so here's one thing that we do is we give them free trials. Right. And so this is where I think this is a really important component related to building a product. And I speak from experience, not from FloWater, but also prior startup companies. A lot of startups give away the product, and you just pushing it out into the market. And I'm not as big of a fan of that. I mean, there's a few instances where it works and it makes sense. So you got like Snapchats and Instagrams of the world, but I mean, you can't use that as your basis and your barometer for building a successful tech startup, in my opinion. It's possible that it's a bit of an anomaly. I like looking at things that I know the market likes, and the way that you know the market likes it is if they'll pay for it. And which is why we always look to kind of transact. So going back to the question specifically, I might go ahead and give it a couple goes with them, and then go next. I think if someone doesn't understand, if they don't feel the unmet need in the marketplace in the seed stage, it's really difficult to try to convince someone that the sky is blue if they think it's yellow. And I was, if they don't have, if I've explained it to them, they still don't get the unmet need, they've experienced it and still don't get the unmet need, next.
Not give away, but trials. It maintains the value.
Yeah, so the free trials because they're limited. So we only did them for 2 weeks. This is one of these constant issues. So, you go out in the field and someone says, hey, $125 is too much, and then they're in this didn't happen here, but like then they're in an office like this, and that tripod, how much was that tripod? Was it $10,000 tripod probably, right? But I mean, they're spending, these organizations spend so much money on chairs and tripods and coffee and whiteboards that if I can't get someone to see the value of $125 a month, either A, I've done a really crappy job of selling the value proposition, or B, they're just not a candidate for the product. And I try to move on. Now, that being said, I've tried, we had some internal debates about this as well. I like maintaining pricing in the market. So I didn't want to go to some 125 and go down to like 180, we do it for 80, or we do it for 79. If I can convince someone that like 17 cents an hour or 18 cents an hour or whatever it is, isn't enough value that they're extracting out of FloWater, I'm ready to move on to the next person. The other reason I think that's important is because you need to generate unit economics. And you need to be able to generate, so I can go to the market now and say, I know the market for this is 125 a month. Why do I know it's 125 a month? Because we actually started at 100 and we just kept increasing it. And we got to 125, so we're 25% above our per unit revenue projection than our original forecast 18 months ago because we maintain pricing. At the same time, we gotta get users. So I'm a fan of getting users earlier on, but then like closing the faucet and then making sure people pay for it. If they won't start paying for it after you get the users in the case study, I think there's a market problem. The back and then over there. Good question.
So now I'm actually continuing on this question. So the first few gyms, how did you really get into them to the point where they're like, what, let's go for it, sign up for it?
Yeah, so the question is how do you get into gyms, how do you pitch them, or how do you get them to say yes? Well, first of all, I'll just tell you, to some degree, we stumbled into the gyms. So we were calling on gyms and fitness centers. We were also calling on a litany of other people and other verticals as well. To just, that's what you're doing in the seed round, is you're putting chips places and you're trying to see, like, where is the artery? And you're just, you're just in surgery, like, trying to find the artery. I wish I had a really cool answer for you, and I guess it was slugging it out on the pavement. I mean, really, like, it was me and Wyatt hitting the streets, selling people on why FloWater was something that was revolutionary, that would dramatically change the experience that their athletes or their members were having in that gym. And we had 5 people buy into it, 10 people buy into it, and then of course, once you get your first 5 to 10, the first 100 is the most difficult 100. The next 300 that we sell will be 5 times easier than the first 100 that we sold. And the same is going to go for the next 5,000, especially as we start to get huge enterprise accounts, you get to a Marriott or a Hyatt or whatever it is that has enterprise scale. So I wish I had a great answer for you, but it's what I've done in every startup company as well. Is I've never launched a product and not gone out and tried to sell it, or gone with the team and tried to sell it. Because if I can't sell it, and in fact, I'm not a great salesperson. I'm a decent salesperson, I'm not a great salesperson. I sold Cutco. Sometimes I tell a story in my background. I sold Cutco when I was in college, high school. And I remember do you guys know what Cutco is? It's knives. You're selling knives door to door. I mean, fundraising is so much easier than selling knives door to door, I promise you. So it's a great training ground. If you want to see how much fun fundraising really is, go try to sell knives. So I put my way through college doing that. And I remember being in my demo, I must have made, gosh, 10,000 cold calls, 3,000 presentations. There's a page on these collector knives. These are amazing knives, by the way. If you're not buying FloWater Refill Station knives, I want you to buy custom. These are amazing knives. And there's this page, but they're really sharp. And there's this page in the demo. I was 18, I was giving this demo, and I'm on this page. And the page was, a sharper knife is a safer knife, because that was always an objection. It's like, hey, these are too sharp, I'm going to cut myself. So we always handle the objection. If the objection comes up, and you sell them, and you say, hey, actually sharper knife, safer knife. And I remember slicing my finger open on that page. Only because I was saying a sharper knife, safer knife, slice my thumb open. It's bleeding. It's like almost like a Saturday Night Live skit. Like it's like an artery in my thumb. It's splitting out, and I do what any natural person would do, which is like I act like nothing happened. And I put my hand in my pocket. So look, I am not a great salesperson. So that's why I insist on myself going out in the field and selling. Because if I can go and sell it, A, I'm going to learn about the market, but then B, I believe it's saleable. So really good question though about selling and getting in the market. Thanks for that. There's another question. One more question. Is there one more?
Do you think you can actually like pre-sell the product as almost like a Kickstarter campaign, right? So
Yeah.
if it's a revolutionary product, why not do a Kickstarter where you get all this exposure?
Yeah. Question was why not do Kickstarter? Good question. The refill stations are not as appropriate for Kickstarter because it's more of a B2B environment, right? And there could be some like consumer kind of crowdfunding, outsourcing where like thousands of students at UCLA all pay $10 and they get FloWater refill stations for all the UCLA, but that's a lot more complicated. You have institutions and administration and approvals and whatnot. We will probably use something like that for the home units. It's a great way for us to sell our first 10,000 units through Kickstarter, to fund it. I think one of the challenges of hardware in the startup space is you got to raise a fair amount of capital up front. I mean, typical like startup company, you got to raise 150, 200K, proof of concept, get a few developers, 6, 9, 12 months later, you've got something on the market, you're raising an A round, maybe $5 to $10 million valuation. It's not crazy, it tends to be high. Like, let's say $4 to $6 million valuation, if you did it within like 6, 8, 10 months. You can move really quickly and not get diluted too heavily. Whereas in this environment, you're raising a lot of capital up front, especially early stage when we didn't have anything validated. We didn't know could we build it, we didn't know could we sell it, we didn't know could we deploy it, we didn't know could we scale it. And now we know all of those things. But something like Kickstarter is great for hardware, especially going to the consumer side. So we'll probably use something like that for the home units and some other projects that we have on the horizon. Okay, I think I'm out of time, right? Was I getting the signal?
You were.
All right, I'm out. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
That's the outcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's going to be online. George? Hey, Raz.